The California sun beat down on the obstacle course at Marine Corps Base Pendleton, turning the sand into a shimmering heat trap that would test even the most seasoned recruits. Kira Ashford stood at the starting line, her slight frame dwarfed by the towering walls and rope climbs ahead. She could feel the eyes on her, measuring, judging, already dismissing. Staff Sergeant Vance Holloway paced behind the line of recruits, his boots crunching against the gravel with each deliberate step. "You see that first wall?" he called out, his voice carrying across the course like a whip crack. "That is 8 feet of reality check. Some of you will fly over it. Some of you will struggle. And some of you," he paused, his gaze landing squarely on Kira, "should not be here at all." Laughter rippled through the line. Corporal Brendan Cross stood 3 positions down, his perfect posture and cocky grin making him look like he belonged on a recruitment poster. He leaned toward the recruit next to him, not bothering to lower his voice. $20 says she does not make it past the second obstacle. Before we go further into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have a military base near your community, or perhaps you have witnessed moments where someone was underestimated right from the start. Kira kept her eyes forward, her breathing steady despite the weight of their judgment. She had learned long ago that attention was currency, and right now, being underestimated was exactly where she needed to be. The memories flickered behind her eyes, unbidden. Mountain air so thin it burned. The crack of a rifle echoing off canyon walls. A voice, patient and demanding, whispering corrections in her ear. "Not yet," that voice always said. "Not yet." "Move out," Holloway barked. The recruits surged forward. Kira ran with them, her stride shorter, her pace deliberately measured. She reached the first wall and hesitated, her hands gripping the edge as others vaulted over with practiced ease. Private First Class Lucia Reyes glanced back as she cleared the wall, something like concern flickering across her face before she turned away and kept running. Kira pulled herself up slowly, her movements awkward and strained. She could feel Holloway watching, his disappointment radiating like heat. By the time she dropped to the other side, half the group had already reached the rope climb. "Come on, Ashford," Holloway shouted. "My grandmother moves faster than that, and she's been dead for 5 years." More laughter. Kira pushed forward, her breathing now audibly labored. The rope climb loomed ahead, 30 feet of twisted hemp that swayed in the coastal breeze. Cross reached it first, scaling it with the fluid confidence of someone who had been doing this since childhood. He rang the bell at the top and descended in controlled drops, landing with barely a sound. "Your turn, Princess," he said as Kira approached, his smile sharp and cruel. "Try not to embarrass yourself too badly." She gripped the rope, her hands positioned just slightly wrong, and began to climb. Her technique was clumsy, her legs failing to grip properly, her arms doing all the work. Halfway up, she stopped, her muscles visibly trembling. The rope swayed dangerously. "Either move or drop," Holloway called. "You are wasting everyone's time." Kira descended, her hands sliding too fast, hitting the ground harder than necessary. She stumbled, caught herself, and looked up to find the entire group staring at her. Some with pity, most with contempt, Cross with open amusement. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood off to the side with his clipboard, his expression carefully neutral. He made a mark on his sheet and looked away. "That is enough," Holloway said, his voice dripping with disgust. "Ashford, fall out. The rest of you continue." Kira walked to the side of the course, her head down, her shoulders slumped in apparent defeat. She could hear Cross laughing, could feel the weight of their judgment settling over her like a familiar coat. "Good," she thought. "Let them think I am weak. Let them think I do not belong." Because when the moment came, when everything depended on steady hands and a calm heart, they would never see her coming. Just like he taught her, just like the ghost always said, hide in plain sight until the shot is all that matters. The sun climbed higher. The course continued, and Kira Ashford stood alone in the shade, watching, waiting, remembering the wind in the mountains and the impossible distances she had already conquered in silence. The rifle range sat at the eastern edge of the base, with a morning fog rolled in thick from the ocean and hung in the air like a living thing. Kira arrived early, before the others, before even Chief Warrant Officer Dale Kowalski had unlocked the equipment shed. She stood at the firing line, her eyes tracking across the target's downrange, calculating distances and wind patterns with practiced precision that no one would ever see. The door to the shed creaked open. Kowalski emerged, his weathered face showing decades of sun and gunpowder. He glanced at Kira, nodded once, and began setting up the range with methodical efficiency. He said nothing, but his eyes lingered on her stance for just a moment longer than necessary. The rest of the platoon arrived in clusters, their voices carrying across the range with easy confidence. Cross led the pack, his rifle slung over his shoulder like it was an extension of his body. He saw Kira, and his grin widened. "Oh good," he announced to everyone within earshot. "Entertainment is already here. Who wants to bet she holds the rifle backwards?" Staff Sergeant Holloway emerged from his vehicle, his clipboard in hand and his expression already set to permanent disappointment. "Listen up," he barked. "Today we qualify on the M4. This is not complicated. You aim, you breathe, you squeeze. Even the simplest among you should be able to manage that." He looked directly at Kira, should being the key word. The recruits lined up. Kowalski distributed weapons and magazines with practiced efficiency, offering brief reminders about sight pictures and breathing control. When he handed Kira her rifle, his fingers brushed the stock and he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Make sure your cheek weld is solid," he said quietly. "That is where most people lose their accuracy." Kira nodded, took the weapon, and immediately adjusted her grip to something clumsy and uncertain. She fumbled with the magazine, nearly dropping it before seating it with an audible click that made several recruits wince. "Jesus," Cross muttered. "Someone is going to get killed with her on the line." Holloway walked behind the firing positions, stopping at each recruit to check their setup. When he reached Kira, he sighed with the weight of a man bearing an unbearable burden. "Your stance is wrong. Your grip is wrong. Your sight alignment is probably wrong." He shook his head. "I do not know who approved your recruitment, but they did both of us a disservice." Kira adjusted her position, making it somehow worse. Holloway walked away, his disgust palpable. "Commence firing," Kowalski called from the tower. The range erupted in controlled bursts of gunfire. Brass casings glinted in the weak sunlight as they arced through the air. The smell of cordite mixed with the salt air. Kira fired slowly, her shots spread across the target in what appeared to be random patterns. She missed the center mass entirely, clipped the edge of the target twice, and sent one round into the dirt berm. Cross, 2 positions over, grouped his shots in a tight cluster dead center. He ejected his magazine with a flourish, reloaded, and fired again with the same precision. When the ceasefire was called, he stood and stretched like a cat, supremely satisfied with himself. Kowalski moved downrange to score the targets. The numbers went up on the board. Cross scored expert, as expected. Lucia Reyes scored sharpshooter. Most of the platoon fell somewhere in the marksman range. Kira Ashford, Kowalski called, his voice carefully neutral, did not qualify. The laughter started immediately. Holloway closed his eyes like he was praying for patience. Cross turned to the recruit next to him, his voice loud enough to carry. "I have seen blind people shoot better. I have seen people with no arms shoot better. I have seen targets shoot back with better accuracy." Kira set her rifle down, her hands trembling slightly. The trembling was real, but not from fear or inadequacy. It came from the effort of restraining herself, of firing deliberately poorly when every instinct, every hour of training, every whispered lesson in the high mountain screamed at her to show them what she could really do. But the ghost had been clear. "Patience is the sniper's greatest weapon," he had said, his voice gravelly from decades of silence and solitude. Anyone could take a shot. The truly dangerous ones know when not to. She had spent 6 months in those mountains, learning to shoot at distances that seemed impossible, in conditions that would make hardened soldiers weep. She had learned to read wind by watching grass blades 300 meters away. She had learned to calculate bullet drop in her head faster than computers. She had learned to slow her heartbeat between trigger pulls, to make herself invisible, to become the shot itself. And now she stood on this range, surrounded by men who thought she could not hit a target at 25 meters, and she let them believe it. Ashford, Holloway called. You will repeat qualification every day until you pass or wash out. I am betting on washout. Yes, Staff Sergeant, Kira replied, her voice small and defeated. As the platoon filed off the range, Lucia Reyes hesitated, falling in a step beside Kira. Listen, she said quietly, her voice uncertain. If you need help, I could show you some basics. Grip, stance, breathing. Kira looked at her, saw the genuine concern, the conflict between kindness and self-preservation. It is okay, she said softly. I will figure it out. Lucia nodded and hurried to catch up with the others, eager to escape the association with failure. Kira walked alone to the armory to turn in her weapon. Kowalski stood the window, accepting rifles and checking serial numbers. When Kira handed hers over, he held it for a moment, his fingers running along the stock. You know, he said conversationally, not looking at her, I have been scoring targets for 23 years. I have seen every kind of shooter. The naturals, the tryhards, the hopeless cases. He set her rifle in the rack, his movements deliberate. But I have never seen someone miss the same way twice while making it look random. That takes a particular kind of skill. Kira said nothing. Kowalski turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Whatever you are doing, he said quietly, I hope you know what you are playing at. Because this game you are running, it is going to get harder before anyone lets you prove otherwise. He waved her off. Dismissed. Kira walked out into the afternoon sun, her mind already calculating how long she could maintain the charade, how much abuse she could absorb, and most importantly, when a moment would come that would make all of this worthwhile. In the distance, she could hear Cross laughing, could feel the weight of Holloway's contempt, could sense the careful distance Lucia maintained. Good, she thought again. Let them underestimate. Let them mock. Because somewhere out there, a situation was brewing that would require someone with her particular skills. And when it came, when the impossible shot needed taking, they would learn exactly who Kira Ashford really was. The barracks at night carried its own particular soundtrack. Snoring from exhausted bodies, the hum of the ancient air conditioning unit, the occasional cough or rustle of someone shifting in their rack. Kira lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, her mind wandering back to the mountains where silence was absolute and every sound meant something. She had almost drifted off when she heard the whispers, soft at first, then growing bolder. Cross's voice, unmistakable in its casual cruelty. Tomorrow morning, 0:30. Her pack, her boots, everything. Laughter quickly stifled. Someone said something Kira could not quite hear, followed by more suppressed amusement. She kept her breathing steady, her body still, giving no indication she was awake. The ghost had taught her that too. Information was ammunition, and you never let the enemy know what you had loaded in the chamber. The next morning arrived with the harsh blare of reveille. Kira swung out of her rack and immediately knew something was wrong. Her boots sat exactly where she had left them, but they felt heavier. She picked one up and water poured from the interior, soaking her hand and splashing onto the floor. Both boots filled to the brim and left to soak overnight. Her pack had been rifled through. Nothing missing, but everything rearranged, her carefully organized gear now a jumbled mess. Someone had taken the time to tie the zippers together with elaborate knots that would take precious minutes to untangle. Around her, the other recruits were getting ready with practiced efficiency. Lucia glanced over, saw the water pooling around Kira's feet, and quickly looked away. No one said anything. No one offered help. The message was clear. You are on your own. Kira dumped the remaining water from her boots and pulled them on anyway, the cold wetness immediately soaking through her socks. She worked at the knots on her pack with methodical patience, her fingers steady even as the minutes ticked away and the others filed out for morning formation. She was the last one out, her boots squelching with each step, her pack finally freed but hastily repacked. Staff Sergeant Holloway stood at the front of the formation, his watch prominently displayed on his wrist. He looked at Kira, then at his watch, then back at Kira. Late Ashford. Again. He shook his head. At this point, I am just documenting your failures for the inevitable discharge paperwork. Cross stood in formation, his face a mask of innocence, but his eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The morning run was torture. Wet boots and wet socks meant blisters, and blisters meant pain with every footfall. Kira kept pace at the back of the formation, her jaw set, her breathing controlled. She had run 20 miles through mountain snow in boots that were falling apart, had kept moving when her feet were bleeding and her legs were screaming. This was nothing. This was just noise. The day's training exercise was navigation and land nav, working in teams of 4 to locate checkpoints scattered across the sprawling base terrain. Holloway read off the team assignments with disinterest. Cross, you are with Daniels and Reyes. He continued down the list, pairing recruits with practiced efficiency. When he reached Kira, he paused. Ashford, you are with. He glanced at his clipboard, Martinez and Webb. Private Martinez groaned audibly. Staff Sergeant, do we really have to? Holloway fixed him with a flat stare. Did I stutter, Martinez? No, Staff Sergeant. Then get your gear and move out. Martinez and the other Webb, not the lieutenant, but a lanky recruit from Texas, gathered their equipment with visible reluctance. Kira approached them, her pack secured, her map case in hand. Martinez did not even look at her. Okay, here is how this works, he said to Webb, pointedly excluding Kira from the conversation. We hit the first 3 checkpoints, skip the 4th because it is too far out of the way, then double back for the last 2. Easy day. Webb nodded, already studying the map. What about the 4th checkpoint? It is worth the most points. Martinez waved dismissively. Not worth the time. We will still pass without it. They set off, Kira trailing behind. She studied the terrain, noting landmarks, and calculating distances with the precision that had been drilled into her during countless hours of field exercises with the Ghost. The first checkpoint was easy, located near an old communications bunker. Martinez found it, logged their time, and they moved on. The second checkpoint required more navigation, hidden in a dense grove of eucalyptus trees. Webb led them there, his map reading competent but not exceptional. By the time they reached the 3rd checkpoint, it was clear that Martinez and Webb had forgotten Kira was even with them. They talked between themselves, shared water, made jokes. She was a ghost in her own team. The 4th checkpoint, Martinez had said, was too far. But Kira knew better. She had studied the map the night before, had memorized the terrain, had calculated optimal routes the way the Ghost had taught her. The 4th checkpoint was not too far. It was just in the wrong direction for lazy navigation. They reached a junction where the path split. Martinez gestured left. This way to checkpoint 5. Let's wrap this up. Kira spoke for the first time in an hour. The 4th checkpoint is only 800 meters north. We could reach in 15 minutes and still make good time. Martinez turned, his expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Oh, she speaks. Listen, Ashford, Webb and I have this handled. You just try to keep up and stay out of the way. But the points. Martinez stepped closer, his voice dropping to something hard and mean. No one cares about your opinion. No one wants your input. You are deadweight, and the only reason you are even here is because someone checked a diversity box. So shut up and follow. Webb looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Kira held Martinez's gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly and stepped back. The mountain training echoed in her mind. Pick your battles. Save your strength. The real fight is always later. They skipped the 4th checkpoint. When they returned to base, their scores were mediocre, exactly as Kira had predicted. Holloway barely glanced at their results. Adequate, he muttered. Dismissed. As the teams dispersed, Kira noticed Kowalski standing near the equipment shed, watching. He caught her eye and gave the slightest nod, so subtle anyone else would have missed it. But Kira saw it. Recognition, or perhaps warning. She was not sure which. That night, she found her bunk had been short-sheeted, her pillows stuffed with pine cones, her locker locks superglued shut. The harassment was escalating, systematic, designed to break her down piece by piece. Kira sat on the edge of her bunk, removed the pine cones one by one, and remade her bed with the same careful precision she brought to everything. Around her, the barracks buzzed with conversation and laughter. She was alone in a room full of people, invisible except when they wanted someone to mock. In the mountains, the ghost had made her run impossible distances, shoot impossible targets, survive impossible conditions. Why? She had asked once, exhausted and bleeding and ready to quit. Why push this hard? His answer had been simple. Because when the moment comes, and it will come, you will be the only one capable of doing what needs to be done. And everyone who doubted you will have no choice but to see the truth. Kira lay back on her newly made bunk, her body aching, her feet throbbing, her spirit unbroken. Let them escalate, she thought. Let them push. Because somewhere, somehow, the moment was coming, and she would be ready. Commander Pierce Nathanson arrived at the training grounds in an unmarked sedan, his presence announced only by the way Staff Sergeant Holloway suddenly stood straighter and adjusted his cover. Word rippled through the platoon like electricity. The old man himself, here to observe. Nathanson was a legend in his own right, a career officer who had served in every conflict from the Gulf War forward. His hair was silver, his face lined with a map of 3 decades in uniform, but his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. He stood at the edge of the PT field, hands clasped behind his back, watching the recruits with the detached interest of someone who had seen thousands just like them. The platoon ran through their drills with renewed intensity, everyone suddenly remembering proper form and military bearing. Cross executed his obstacle course run with textbook precision. Martinez called his commands with parade ground clarity. Even the slackers pushed harder, unwilling to look weak in front of the commander. Kira, as usual, struggled. She attacked the rope climb with the same clumsy technique that had become her signature, making it halfway before her grip failed and she slid down, landing hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. She heard Holloway's disgusted exhale from across the field. Nathanson said nothing, his expression unreadable. He walked the perimeter of the training area, stopping occasionally to watch specific recruits. When the platoon moved to combat drills, hand-to-hand technique, and tactical movement, he positioned himself where he could observe from multiple angles. The drill was simple. Pairs would engage in controlled sparring, demonstrating basic strikes, blocks, and takedowns. Cross paired with Martinez, both of them moving with the aggressive confidence of natural athletes. Lucia paired with another female recruit, their movements careful and precise. Ashford, Holloway called. "You are with Webb." Webb, the lanky Texan, looked like he had been asked to spar with a child. He approached Kira with obvious reluctance, his hands up in a defensive stance that suggested he was afraid he might actually hurt her. "Begin," Holloway ordered. Webb threw a slow, telegraph jab. Kira stepped back, her block awkward and late. He followed with a cross that she barely deflected. The watching recruits lost interest quickly. It was not even a real fight, just Webb going through the motions while Kira flailed ineffectively. But Nathanson watched. His eyes tracked Kira's footwork, the way she positioned her weight, the angle of her defensive posture. Something flickered across his face, recognition or perhaps confusion, gone as quickly as it appeared. Webb attempted a takedown, more to end the embarrassment than from any tactical consideration. Kira went down easily, hitting the mat with a grunt. Webb helped her up, his face flushed with second-hand embarrassment. "Enough," Holloway said. He glanced at Nathanson, trying to read the commander's reaction. "As you can see, sir, we have a wide range of capabilities in this cycle." Nathanson nodded slowly. "Indeed." He turned to Holloway. "Staff Sergeant," a word. They stepped away, their voices low but intense. Kira could not hear the conversation, but she saw Holloway's posture shift from defensive to confused to something approaching concern. The commander was pointing at something on a tablet, showing Holloway information that made the staff sergeant's expression darken. When they returned, Holloway's demeanor had changed. He looked at Kira with something new in his eyes. Not respect, but calculation. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle he had not known existed. The rest of the training day proceeded normally, but Kira felt the shift. Nathanson remained for another hour, observing from different vantage points, taking notes on his tablet. At one point, during a water break, she caught him staring directly at her. Not with contempt like the others, but with the focused intensity of someone trying to remember something important. When he finally departed, the tension that had gripped the platoon released like a spring. Cross immediately began regaling anyone who would listen with his performance. Did you see my time on the course? Pure domination. Commander probably came out here specifically to scout talent. Martinez laughed. Yeah, talent. You shot a look at Kira. As opposed to whatever that was. Lucia stood nearby, her water bottle halfway to her lips. She watched Kira with an expression that had evolved from pity to something more complex. Curiosity, perhaps, or suspicion. That evening, after chow, Kira was called to the company office. Her stomach tightened, but she kept her face neutral as she reported. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the officer, not the recruit, sat behind the desk, his expression professionally blank. At ease, Ashford. He shuffled papers on his desk, not quite meeting her eyes. I have been reviewing your file. Your academic scores are exceptional. Your physical fitness test scores, however, are consistently below standard. Your marksmanship qualification is, he paused, searching for a diplomatic word, concerning. Yes, sir, Kira replied. Webb leaned back in his chair. Commander Nathanson requested your complete service record this afternoon. He seemed particularly interested in your background. Were you trained before enlisting? Any prior military connections in your family? Kira's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. I have no military family, sir. I trained on my own before enlisting. Trained in what exactly? Physical fitness, sir. Running, basic conditioning. Webb studied her for a long moment. The thing is, Ashford, the commander seemed to recognize something. In your movement patterns, your positioning. He said it reminded him of someone he served with years ago. Someone with a very particular skill set. Kira said nothing. The silence stretched between them. Webb finally sighed. Look, I do not know what is going on here, and, frankly, it is above my pay grade. But whatever you are doing, wherever you came from, people are starting to notice. And not a good way. The harassment, the hazing, it is escalating. I have documented it, but unless you file a formal complaint, my hands are tied. I can handle it, sir, Kira said. Can you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you are drowning. Webb, close her file. Dismissed. Kira saluted and left, her mind racing. Nathanson recognized something. The way she moved, the way she positioned herself, even when she was trying to look incompetent. The ghost had trained her too well, had ingrained patterns so deeply that they showed through despite her best efforts to hide them. She walked back to the barracks as the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In the mountains, the ghost had told her stories about his service, about the men he had fought beside, about a young officer named Nathanson who had saved his life in Fallujah and never asked for recognition. If Nathanson remembered the ghost, if he recognized the training patterns, then the timeline was accelerating. Her cover, thin as it was, might not hold much longer. The thought should have worried her, but instead, she felt something else. Anticipation. Back in the barracks, Cross and Martinez were holding court, telling elaborate stories about their performances under the commander's watchful eye. Kira passed them without acknowledgement, found her bunk, and lay down. Her body ached from the day's deliberate failures, from throwing herself badly, from holding back the muscle memory that wanted to execute techniques perfectly. Somewhere in the darkness, Lucia's voice whispered, Kira, you awake? Kira did not respond, letting her breathing remain steady and deep. After a moment, Lucia sighed and rolled over. The barracks settled into its nighttime rhythm, but sleep did not come easily. Kira's mind replayed Nathanson's face, the moment of recognition, the calculation in his eyes. The ghost had prepared her for many things, but not for being recognized before the moment was right. Not for someone connecting the dots too early. She would have to be more careful. Or perhaps the time for hiding was running out faster than anyone expected. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, headed towards some emergency on base. Kira listened to it fade and wondered if her moment was approaching sooner than she had planned. The announcement came during morning formation, delivered by Staff Sergeant Holloway with the enthusiasm of a man reading a death sentence. In 2 weeks, this platoon will undergo final qualification exercises. These will determine your assignments, your specializations, and for some of you, whether you continue service at all. He paced along the formation, his boots grinding against the gravel. The qualifications will cover everything you have learned. Marksmanship, land navigation, physical fitness, tactical operations, and close-quarters combat. Performance standards are non-negotiable. Those who fail will recycle or separate. His eyes found Kira in the ranks. I think we all know who is most at risk. Cross smirked. Martinez coughed to hide a laugh. The rest of the platoon shifted uncomfortably, everyone grateful they were not the target. Dismissed to your training rotations, Holloway ordered. The platoon dispersed, breaking into assigned groups for the day's intensive preparation. Kira found herself, as usual, in the remedial group. The people who could not quite cut it, the ones who needed extra instruction, the ones Holloway had mentally written off. There were 5 of them, gathered at the far end of the PT field like unwanted furniture. Chief Warrant Officer Kowalski approached, carrying a worn range bag and an expression of infinite patience. He had volunteered to work with the remedial group, much to Holloway's barely concealed relief. "All right," Kowalski said, his voice carrying none of Holloway's contempt. "We have 2 weeks to get you ready. I'm not going to lie to you. It is going to be hard, but hard is not impossible." He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze lingering on Kira just a fraction longer. "We start with the basics. No shortcuts, no excuses, just fundamentals done right, over and over, until they become instinct." The other 4 recruits nodded eagerly, desperate for any help. Kira kept her expression neutral, already calculating how much improvement she could show without revealing too much. It was a delicate balance, getting better but not too good, failing but not too spectacularly. They spent the morning on the range. Kowalski worked with each recruit individually, adjusting stances, correcting breathing, explaining sight alignment with the patient precision of a craftsman teaching an apprentice. When he reached Kira, he knelt beside her firing position and studied her setup. "Your grip is too loose," he said, loudly enough for the others to hear. Then, quieter, almost a whisper, but not as loose as you pretend. He adjusted her hand position, his movements deliberate. "There. Now show me what you can do with proper form." Kira fired a 5-round group. They clustered near the center. Not perfect, but dramatically better than her previous performances. The improvement was noticeable, but not suspicious. Exactly what someone with good coaching might achieve. "Better," Kowalski said. "Keep that grip, keep that breathing pattern. You might just qualify after all." The days blurred together into a relentless cycle of training. Wake at 0:30. PT until muscle screamed. Classes on tactics and protocols. Range time. Combat drills. Equipment maintenance. Sleep for a few precious hours. Repeat. The pressure mounted with each passing day, the qualification deadline looming like a storm on the horizon. Cross and Martinez trained with their usual group, the high performers who would undoubtedly score expert on everything. Kira watched them sometimes, during brief moments between rotations, studying their techniques with the analytical eye the ghost had trained in her. They were good, genuinely skilled, but they relied on athleticism and confidence. They had never been pushed to the absolute edge of capability, never forced to make impossible shots under impossible conditions. One afternoon, during a tactical movement exercise, Kira found herself in a simulated building clearing drill. The structure was an old maintenance building, repurposed into a training facility with pop-up targets and narrow corridors designed to test decision-making under stress. Kowalski stood at the entrance with a stopwatch. Standard clearing procedure. Identify threats, neutralize targets, avoid civilian casualties. Your time starts when you breach. Kira entered the building, her rifle raised in the awkward stance she had cultivated. The first room was clear. The second contained 2 hostile targets and 1 civilian. She engaged the targets slowly, her shots adequate but not impressive. The civilian remained untouched. As she moved deeper into the building, something shifted. Muscle memory took over for a fraction of a second. She pied a corner with textbook precision, her weapon tracking smoothly, her footwork fluid and exact. She caught herself immediately, stumbling slightly to cover the mistake, but it was too late. Kowalski had seen it. When she emerged from the building, he marked her time on his clipboard, his face carefully neutral. Not bad, Ashford. Your room clearing is improving. Then, barely audible, you move like a professional for a moment there. Might want to be more careful about that. Kira met his eyes. He knew, or at least suspected, but instead of exposing her, he was protecting her secret. The question was why. That evening, as the platoon cleaned weapons and prepared gear for the next day, Lucia finally approached Kira directly. She sat down on the bench beside her, her rifle disassembly spread out between them. Can I ask you something? Kira continued working on her weapon. Sure. Why are you really here? Lucia's voice was quiet, meant only for Kira's ears. I have been watching you. Everyone thinks you are incompetent, but sometimes, just for a second, I see something different. Like you're holding back. Kira did not look up from her rifle. I'm just trying to get through training. No, Lucia said. That is not it. I grew up with 4 brothers in the military. I know what struggling looks like, and I know what hiding looks like. You are hiding. The cleaning rod paused in Kira's hand for just a moment. Maybe I just do not want any more attention than I already have. Being the worst has its advantages. People leave you alone. Lucia considered this. The harassment does not look like being left alone. Kira assembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, each piece sliding into place with mechanical precision. What do you want me to say, Lucia? That I am secretly some kind of special operator? That I am here undercover? She shook her head. I am exactly what I look like. Someone who barely qualifies, who might not make it, who everyone thinks does not belong. But Lucia was not convinced. Kira could see it in her eyes, the doubt mixed with curiosity. I just think there's more to your story. And I think whatever it is, you have your reasons for keeping it quiet. She stood, gathering her rifle components. For what it is worth, I hope you make it through qualifications. Despite what everyone says, I think you might surprise people. She walked away before Kira could respond. The barracks buzzed with the usual evening activity. Cross held court near his bunk, predicting his expert scores with absolute certainty. Martinez was reorganizing his gear for the 100th time, nervous energy disguised as preparation. Kira finished her weapons maintenance and lay back on her bunk. 2 weeks until qualifications. 14 days to maintain her cover while showing enough improvement to avoid being recycled. It was a tightrope walk, made more dangerous by Kowalski's knowing glances and Lucia's growing suspicion. In the mountains, the ghost had once made her shoot a target at 1,400 meters in 40 mph winds. She had missed the first 20 shots, her frustration building with each failure. Then he had said something that changed everything. Stop trying to force the shot. Wait for the moment when everything aligns. Wind, breath, heartbeat, target. The perfect shot is not taken. It is received. She had made that shot on her 21st attempt, the bullet finding its mark against all probability. The ghost had smiled, a rare expression that transformed his weathered face. Now you understand. Patience is not passive. It is active waiting, preparation for the inevitable moment. Kira closed her eyes and waited. 2 weeks. The moment was coming. And when it arrived, everyone would see exactly what she had been preparing for all along. 1 week remained until qualifications. The tension in the platoon had transformed from background noise into something alive and hungry, feeding on every mistake, every doubt, every moment of weakness. Sleep became a luxury few could afford, replaced by late-night study sessions and obsessive gear checks. Kira sat on her bunk, methodically cleaning her rifle for the 3rd time that evening. Around her, the barracks hummed with anxious energy. Cross was doing pull-ups on a makeshift bar, his shirt off, his muscles gleaming with sweat as he counted reps with aggressive precision. Martinez quizzed himself on radio protocols, muttering call signs and frequencies under his breath. Lucia approached, her footsteps hesitant. She carried 2 protein bars, offering one to Kira with an uncertain smile. "Thought you might need this. I know you've been skipping meals." Kira accepted the bar, surprised by the gesture. "Thanks." Lucia sat down, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Listen, about the other day, what I said. I am sorry if I pushed too hard. Whatever your reasons are, they are yours. I just wanted you to know that not everyone here thinks you do not belong." Before Kira could respond, Cross's voice cut across the barracks. "Oh, look, the 2 charity cases bonding. How touching." He dropped from a bar, landing with a thud that shook the floor. "Hey, Reyes, you trying to drag yourself down to Ashford's level? Because that is where you are headed if you keep associating with deadweight." Lucia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The barracks went quiet, everyone watching to see how this would play out. Cross walked over, his presence dominating the space between the bunks. "Seriously though, Ashford, why are you even still here? You fail every qual, you slow down every team, you embarrass the whole platoon. What is the point?" Kira looked up at him, her expression calm. "To finish what I started." Cross laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Finish what you started? You have not even begun. Qualifications are in 7 days. 7 days, and then everyone will see what we already know. You do not have what it takes. You never did." Martinez joined him, sensing blood in the water. "My money is on you washing out by day 2. Maybe day 1 if we are lucky." Lucia stood, her hands clenched at her sides. "Leave her alone, Cross." Cross turned his attention to her, his smile widening. "Or what, Reyes? You going to defend her? You going to tell me I am wrong?" He gestured at Kira. "Show me one thing, just one thing she does well. One reason she deserves to be here." The silence stretched. Lucia opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to produce an answer that would satisfy Cross's challenge. Her shoulders sagged slightly, defeat written in the gesture. "That is what I thought," Cross said. He looked back at Kira. 7 days. Then this charade ends." He walked away, Martinez following like a loyal shadow. The barracks slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the damage was done. Lucia stood frozen, her guilt obvious. "I should have said something better. I should have defended you properly." "It is fine," Kira said quietly. Words would not have changed his mind anyway. But Lucia shook her head. "It is not fine. None of this is fine. The way they treat you, the way everyone just watches." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "I hate that I have been part of the problem, that I stayed quiet so long because I was afraid of becoming a target too." Kira met her eyes. "You're not responsible for other people's cruelty." "Maybe not, but I am responsible for my own silence." Lucia sat back down, her shoulders squared with new determination. "For what it is worth, whatever happens next week, I believe you can do this. I do not know why I believe it, but I do." The night deepened. One by one, the barracks lights went out until only the emergency strips remained, casting everything in dim red shadow. Kira lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Cross's words echoing in her mind. 7 days. The timeline was accelerating whether she was ready or not. The next morning brought a surprise. Commander Nathanson returned to the base, this time with a small delegation of officers Kira did not recognize. They stood at the edge of the training field, observing with the focused intensity of people evaluating assets. Staff Sergeant Holloway was on edge, barking orders with unusual sharpness, determined to make his platoon look competent. Today's exercise was combat marksmanship under stress. Recruits would navigate an obstacle course while engaging targets at various distances, simulating real combat conditions. Cross went first as expected. He moved through the course with fluid confidence, engaging targets with rapid precision. His shots were good, not perfect but solid. The observers took notes. Martinez followed with similar results. Then Lucia, who performed well despite visible nervousness. The morning progressed, each recruit running the course while the rest watched and the observers evaluated. Finally, Holloway called Kira's name. His tone carried resignation, like he was performing an unpleasant duty. "Ashford, you're up. Try not to shoot yourself." Laughter rippled through the platoon. Kira stepped to the starting line, checking her weapon with the clumsy care she had perfected. Commander Nathanson watched from his position, his eyes sharp and evaluating. The whistle blew. Kira moved forward, her pace deliberate but not fast. The first obstacle was a low crawl under barbed wire with targets visible at 50 meters. She engaged them from the prone position, her shots grouping adequately but not impressively. 2 hits, 1 miss. Next came a wall climb with targets at 75 meters on the far side. She struggled over the wall, landing heavily, taking too long to acquire her targets. 3 shots, 2 hits. The course continued. Rope swing across a mud pit. Sprint through tires. Each obstacle followed by shooting under increasing fatigue. Kira's performance was consistent with her established pattern. Good enough to not be dangerous. Poor enough to not be remarkable. But as she approached the final obstacle, a high wall with a single target visible at 150 meters, something happened. The wind shifted, carrying the sharp scent of eucalyptus from the distant grove. For a fraction of a second, it transported her back to the mountains, to the ghost's voice in her ear, to the moment when she had made an impossible shot and understood what she was truly capable of. Her hands moved without conscious thought. She sealed the wall with sudden efficiency, dropped into a stable shooting position at the top, and acquired the target. The rifle settled into her shoulder with familiar weight. Her breathing automatically cycled into the pattern the ghost had drilled into her over thousands of repetitions. She pulled the trigger. The shot was perfect. Dead center, 150 meters from an elevated position after physical exertion. The kind of shot that required skill, training, and absolute control. The observers looked up sharply. Nathanson's expression changed, recognition flashing across his face. Kowalski, standing near the starting line, closed his eyes briefly as if in prayer. Kira realized her mistake immediately. She had let the muscle memory take over, had allowed one perfect shot to slip through her carefully maintained facade. She scrambled down from the wall, deliberately clumsy again, trying to undo the damage, but it was too late. The observers were talking among themselves, pointing at score sheets, comparing notes. Nathanson was staring at her with undisguised interest, his head tilted slightly as if seeing her for the first time. Cross stood among the watching recruits, his expression confused and angry. What the hell was that? Holloway looked equally baffled. He checked his own notes, then looked at Kira, then back at his notes. "Ashford," he called. "How did you make that shot?" Kira shrugged, forcing confusion into her voice. "I do not know, Staff Sergeant. I just aimed and fired. Got lucky, I guess." "Lucky," Holloway repeated, disbelief dripping from the word. Nathanson approached, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Staff Sergeant, I would like to see recruit Ashford's complete training records. Everything from day 1. Holloway snapped to attention. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." As the platoon was dismissed, Kira felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her. The carefully constructed cover she had maintained for weeks was cracking, one perfect shot unraveling months of deliberate mediocrity. Cross and Martinez watched her with suspicion. Lucia looked at her with something between vindication and concern. Kowalski caught her arm as she passed. "That was sloppy," he said quietly. "Whatever you are waiting for, you better hope it comes soon, because your secret is about to stop being secret." Kira nodded, her mind racing. The moment was coming whether she was ready or not. And when it arrived, there would be no more hiding, no more pretending. Only the truth, stark and undeniable. The summons came at 1900 hours, delivered by a stone-faced corporal who simply said that Commander Nathanson wanted to see her immediately. Kira followed him through the base as the California sun painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, her mind calculating possibilities and preparing responses for questions she knew were coming. The commander's temporary office was in the administration building, a converted barracks that smelled of old coffee and printer toner. Nathanson sat behind a metal desk, his computer screen casting blue light across his weathered features. He gestured to the chair across from him without looking up. "Sit down, Ashford." Kira sat, her posture rigid, her hands resting on her knees. The office was spare, decorated only with a few framed commendations and a faded photograph of a younger Nathanson in desert camouflage standing beside other soldiers. She recognized the time frame. Fallujah, early 2000s. Nathanson finally looked up, his eyes studying her with the intensity of someone solving a complex equation. "I have been reviewing your file. Your entire file, not just the training records. Academic performance, exceptional. Physical fitness scores before you arrived here, excellent. Then you get to this base, and suddenly you cannot climb a rope or hit a target at 25 meters. His fingers drummed on the desk. "That is interesting, don't you think?" Kira kept her voice steady. "Training has been difficult, sir. The stress, the environment." Nathanson leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You know what else is interesting? That shot you made today. 150 meters, elevated position, after physical exertion, in shifting wind conditions. That is not a lucky shot, Ashford. That is a shot that requires hundreds of hours of training, probably thousands of rounds downrange, and muscle memory, so ingrained it overrides conscious thought." She said nothing, waiting. "So here's what I think," Nathanson continued. "I think someone taught you to shoot. Someone very good. Someone who trains people to make impossible shots under impossible conditions." He stood, walking to the window that overlooked the darkening base. "I served with a man once, long time ago, who had that particular gift. We called him the Ghost because he could hit targets other snipers swore were impossible. He saved my life in Fallujah, put a round through a hostile at 900 meters in a sandstorm that had every other shooter blind." Kira's pulse quickened, but her face remained neutral. Nathanson turned back to face her. "After the war, he disappeared. Went up into the mountains somewhere, refused all contact, turned down every medal and commendation. His name was Gunnery Sergeant Vincent Carrick." He tapped the desk. "Your file says you grew up in rural Montana. Small town called Whitefish, population 3,000. You know what else is near Whitefish? The Bob Marshall Wilderness. Over 1 million acres of mountains where someone could train without anyone knowing." The silence between them grew heavy. Outside, the sounds of evening PT drifted through the window, voices counting cadence in the distance. "I'm not asking you to confirm or deny anything," Nathanson said, his voice softening slightly. "But I'm telling you that if Vincent Carrick trained you, if he passed on what he knows, then you have a responsibility to use those skills properly. Not to hide them, not to waste them playing games with men like Holloway and Cross." "Why would someone hide their abilities, sir?" Kira asked carefully. "Hypothetically speaking." Nathanson considered this. Testing mental fortitude under pressure. Seeing if they can maintain discipline when facing adversity. Learning who can be trusted and who cannot. He met her eyes. "But there comes a time when the test ends and the real work begins. I think we are approaching that time, don't you?" Before Kira could respond, the office door burst open. A lieutenant she did not recognize entered, his face flushed with urgency. "Sir, we have a situation. The operations center needs you immediately." Nathanson's demeanor changed instantly, snapping from reflective to command ready. "What situation?" "Reconnaissance team in the San Jacinto Mountains, sir. They went dark 30 minutes ago. Last transmission indicated possible hostile contact. We're trying to establish communication, but weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly." Nathanson was already moving, grabbing his cover and jacket. He paused at the door, looking back at Kira. "We will continue this conversation later, Ashford." Dismissed. Kira stood and saluted, but her mind was already racing. San Jacinto Mountains. Hostile contact. Weather deteriorating. The pieces were falling into place. The moment the Ghost had prepared her for crystallizing from possibility into reality. She returned to the barracks to find chaos. Word of the situation had spread with the speed of military gossip. Cross and Martinez stood near the entrance, their earlier confidence replaced with genuine concern. Nobody goes dark unless something bad happened, Cross was saying. Those guys are Tier 1 operators. If they're in trouble, we're talking serious trouble. Inside, Lucia sat on her bunk, her face pale. She looked up as Kira entered. Did you hear? A whole team just gone silent. Kira nodded, moving to her locker. She began organizing her gear with deliberate precision, hands moving through practice motions. She cleaned her rifle again, checked her magazines, inventoried her equipment. Around her, the barracks buzzed with speculation and worry. Kowalski appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. He scanned the room until his eyes found Kira. Ashford with me. Now. She followed him outside to a quiet space behind the armory where the sounds of the base were muffled and distant. Kowalski crossed his arms, his face illuminated by the security lights. You know what is happening, don't you? This is what you have been waiting for. Kira met his gaze steadily. I don't know what you mean, Chief. Cut the crap, Ashford. I've been doing this job for 23 years. I know when someone is hiding expert-level skills, and I know why they might do it. Whatever Carrick taught you, whatever this test of yours has been, it ends tonight. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. That team in the mountains needs help. Real help. The kind that requires someone who can make shots other people cannot even attempt. How do you know about Carrick? Kira asked quietly. Because I served with him too. Different unit, different time, but I saw what he could do. And I see it in you, even when you're trying to hide it. He pulled out his phone, showing her a weather radar. Storm system moving in fast. High winds, low visibility, temperature dropping. Helicopters cannot fly in this. Ground teams cannot reach them in time. If that recon team is pinned down, if they need precision fire support, they're going to need a miracle. We're a sniper trained by the Ghost, Kira said. We're that. Kowalski pocketed his phone. Commander Nathanson is in the operations center right now, trying to figure out options. They're going to run through every qualified marksman on base, and they're going to come up empty because the conditions exceed everyone's capabilities. He looked at her hard. Everyone except maybe one person who has been pretending to be incompetent for weeks. Kira felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. This was it. The test was ending. The real work, as Nathanson had said, was beginning. What do I do? You wait, Kowalski said. You wait for them to exhaust every other option. And then, when they have no choice left, you step forward and show them who you really are. He started to walk away, then paused. Carrick chose you for a reason. Trained you for a reason. Don't waste it. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Kira alone with her thoughts. In the distance, she could hear the operations center humming with activity, voices raised in urgent discussion, radios crackling with static and failed attempts at communication. Somewhere in the San Jacinto Mountains, good people were in danger. And somewhere on this base, the moment Kira had been preparing for her entire training was about to arrive. She looked up at the sky, clouds rolling in fast and dark, obscuring the stars. The Ghost had always said that the hardest part of being a sniper was not the shooting. It was the waiting, the patience to let the moment come to you rather than forcing it. But waiting was over. The moment had arrived, and Kira Ashford was ready to show everyone exactly who she had become in those distant mountains under the Ghost, demanding and patient guidance. She walked back to the barracks, her mind calm, her purpose clear, knowing that before this night ended, everything would change. The operations center was a hive of controlled chaos. Kira stood outside, watching through the windows as officers hunched over maps and computer screens, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of tactical displays. She could see Nathanson in the center of it all, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply as he coordinated with someone on the other end. The barracks had emptied as word spread. Most of the platoon now gathered in clusters around the ops center, trying to catch glimpses of what was happening inside. Cross stood with a group of his followers, his earlier arrogance replaced with genuine concern. That his alpha team in those mountains, he said, his voice tight. Some of the best operators in the Corps. If they're in trouble, we are talking serious enemy contact. Martinez nodded grimly. Weather report says winds are hitting 40 knots up there, temperature dropping below freezing. Even if they wanted to send helicopters, they cannot fly in that. Lucia found Kira at the edge of the crowd. Her hands are shaking slightly. Do you think they will be okay? The team in the mountains? Kira watched the operation center, her mind calculating distances, angles, environmental factors. It depends on how pinned down they are, how much ammunition they have left, how long they can hold position in deteriorating conditions. You sound like you know about this stuff, Lucia said quietly. Before Kira could respond, the ops center door opened. Lieutenant Webb emerged, his face drawn with stress. He scanned the crowd, and his eyes landed on the gathered platoon. All personnel with marksman or expert rifle qualifications report to the briefing room immediately. Cross moved forward instantly, Martinez right behind him. A dozen other recruits followed, eager to help, desperate to be useful. They filed into the adjacent briefing room, leaving the rest of the platoon outside in anxious limbo. Kira waited. Patience, the ghost had always said. Let the moment come to you. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The qualified marksmen began emerging from the briefing room, their expressions ranging from frustrated to defeated. Cross came out shaking his head. They want someone to provide overwatch from an elevated position 3 kilometers from LZ. 3 kilometers. In 40-knot winds. With visibility near zero. He laughed bitterly. They are asking for a shot that is basically impossible. What is the target, someone asked. Not a target. A signal. They need someone to fire a tracer round to mark an extraction point for the team once they break contact. But the conditions, the distance, the elevated angle. Cross shook his head again. Nobody in there can make that shot. Hell, I'm not sure anyone on this base can make that shot. Inside the briefing room, Kira could see Nathanson conferring with several senior officers. Their body language spoke of options exhausted, possibilities eliminated, time running out. A map on the screen showed the San Jacinto terrain, topographical lines indicating steep elevation changes and treacherous approach routes. Kowalski appeared at Kira's elbow, materializing from the shadows like his nickname suggested. They are out of options. Every qualified sniper on base is either deployed or cannot make the approach in time. The weather window is closing. In another hour, that team will be completely cut off. Kira's hands were steady at her sides. What is the exact scenario? Kowalski glanced around to ensure no one was listening. Alpha Team is pinned in a canyon approximately 800 meters from a viable extraction point. They need to break contact and move, but they cannot navigate in zero visibility conditions. Someone needs to fire illumination from an elevated position approximately 1,200 meters from the extraction point, providing a visual marker they can move toward. He paused. 1,200 meters through mountain winds from a position that requires a 4-kilometer approach on foot in the dark. And the shot needs to be perfect because they only get one chance. The numbers crystallized in Kira's mind. She had made shots at that distance before, in similar conditions, from positions just as precarious. The ghost had prepared her for exactly this scenario, drilling her relentlessly on wind calculation, elevation adjustments, and shooting from improvised positions in hostile terrain. I can make that shot, Kira said quietly. Kowalski looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the facade she had maintained for weeks. I know you can. The question is whether you are ready to prove it to everyone else. The ops center door opened again. Nathanson emerged, his face etched with the burden of command and impossible choices. He saw the remaining platoon members, and his jaw tightened. We need more options, he said to Lieutenant Webb. Pull the qualification records for anyone with advanced marksmanship training, even if it is from before they enlisted. Webb nodded and hurried off. Nathanson turned to go back inside, then stopped. His eyes swept across the gathered recruits and landed on Kira. Something passed across his face, recognition mixed with calculation. Ashford, he called. Come here. Kira moved forward, feeling dozens of eyes follow her movement. She stepped into the pool of light spilling from the ops center entrance. Nathanson studied her with the intensity of someone making a critical decision. That shot you made today, on the obstacle course. Tell me the truth. Was that luck? No, sir, Kira said. It was not luck. The crowd behind her erupted in whispers. Cross pushed forward, his face twisted with confusion and anger. Wait, what? What is going on? Nathanson held up a hand for silence, his eyes never leaving Kira. Who trained you? Kira took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the end of pretense, the beginning of truth. Gunnery Sergeant Vincent Carrick trained me, sir, for 6 months in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. He taught me long-range precision shooting under extreme conditions. He taught me to make shots other people think are impossible. The silence that followed was absolute. Cross looked like he had been struck. Martinez's mouth hung open. Lucia's eyes were wide with vindication and shock. Even the officers in the ops center had stopped what they were doing to listen. Nathanson stepped closer, his voice dropping. The scenario is this: 1,200-meter shot through mountain winds in near-zero visibility. The shot has to mark an extraction point for a team that is running out of time and options. Can you make that shot? Kira met his gaze without hesitation. Yes, sir. I can make that shot. How certain are you? The Ghost trained me on scenarios exactly like this. Longer distances, worse conditions, more difficult positions. 1,200 meters in wind is well within my capability. She paused. Sir, I know what this looks like. I know I've been hiding my skills. But Sergeant Carrick wanted to ensure I could handle pressure, adversity, and maintain discipline before deploying in real situations. This is that situation. Nathanson turned to the senior officers visible through the window. Gentlemen, I think we have our solution. He looked back at Kira. Gear up, Ashford. You have 20 minutes to prepare. Kowalski will issue you appropriate equipment and brief you on the tactical situation. He stepped closer, his voice for her ears only. If Kara trained you, you better be as good as he was. Because good people are depending on you to make an impossible shot. Yes, sir, Kira said. I will not let them down. As she turned to follow Kowalski to the armory, she heard Cross's voice behind her, strangled with disbelief. This cannot be happening. She cannot even climb a rope. She failed every qualification. Lucia's voice cut through, sharp and certain. She did not fail anything. She was testing us. Testing all of us. And we failed her. Kira walked toward the armory, her mind already shifting into the focused calm the Ghost had cultivated in her. Behind her, the base erupted in chaos as word spread. The incompetent recruit, the girl they mocked, the one they said did not belong. She was about to attempt a shot that would determine whether good people lived or died. And everyone was about to discover exactly who Kira Ashford really was. The armory felt different now. The same space where Kira had turned in her rifle day after day, pretending incompetence, now transformed into a staging area for a real-world operation. Kowalski moved with precise efficiency, pulling equipment from secure lockers and laying it out on the workbench with the reverence of someone handling sacred objects. This is the M110 semi-automatic sniper system, he said, his hands moving over the rifle with practiced familiarity. Effective range well beyond what you need. I have already zeroed it for the conditions, but you want to verify once you reach position. He slid forward a case of ammunition, match-grade rounds, and 3 tracers for the marking shot. Kira picked up the rifle, feeling its weight settle into her hands like a reunion with an old friend. The balance was different from what she had trained with in the mountains, but the fundamentals remained the same. She performed a functions check with fluid precision, each movement economical and exact. Behind her, the armory door opened. She turned to see Cross and Martinez standing in the doorway, their expressions unreadable. Cross stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away. Is it true? What they're saying? That Kara trained you? Kira met his eyes. Yes. For how long? 6 months. Every day. Sometimes 18 hours a day. Martinez shook his head slowly. But why hide it? Why let us think you were incompetent? Why take all that abuse? Because Sergeant Carrick wanted to know if I could maintain discipline under pressure. If I could control my ego when people underestimated me. If I could wait for the moment that mattered instead of proving myself in moments that did not. She returned her attention to the rifle. He was preparing me for situations exactly like this. Cross ran a hand through his hair, his face twisted with conflicting emotions. All those times we mocked you, all the things we said, were tests I passed, Kira said simply. And you failed. The words hung in the air. Cross looked like he wanted to argue, to defend himself, but what defense existed? He had revealed exactly who he was under pressure, and it was not flattering. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. Make the shot, Ashford. Bring those guys home. He left, Martinez following silently. Kowalski resumed the equipment brief, pulling out a tactical vest, night vision optics, and a handheld weather station. You will approach from the eastern ridge, for kilometers on foot. The terrain is challenging but navigable. Once in position, you will have approximately 30 minutes before the weather deteriorates past the point of no return. Understood, Kira said, loading magazines with swift confidence. The door opened again. This time Lucia entered, carrying a Camelback hydration system and energy bars. Thought you might need these. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. I knew there was something. I knew you were more than what you showed us. Kira accepted the supplies. Thank you for believing even when you could not prove it. Lucia's eyes were bright with emotion. That shot today, when I said you might surprise people, I had no idea. She paused. 1,200 meters. In that weather. That is not just good shooting. That is legendary shooting. It is what I was trained to do, Kira said. She finished her equipment check and looked at Lucia directly. When this is over, I hope you remember that the harassment, the mockery, the isolation, all of it could have been stopped if people had chosen courage over silence. Lucia flinched but nodded. I will remember. I promise. Kowalski handed Kira a radio with tactical frequencies already programmed. Commander Nathanson will coordinate from operations. Alpha Team Leader is call sign Raider 6. He will confirm when they are ready to move. Your call sign for this mission is Ghost 2. Kira's throat tightened at the designation. Ghost 2, a tribute to the man who had made her into what she was. Understood, Chief. The door burst open and Nathanson strode in, followed by Lieutenant Webb and 2 other officers. He surveyed Kira's gear with a critical eye, then nodded approval. Transportation is waiting outside. You will insert via Humvee to the base of the eastern approach, then proceed on foot to the firing position. Weather update shows you have maybe 40 minutes of viable conditions, so we are compressed on time. He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only Kira could hear. I served with Carrick for 2 years. I saw him make shots that physics said were impossible. If he trained you, if he passed on what he knew, then I trust you can do this. But understand, 5 lives depend on your skill. No pressure, no second chances. No second chances needed, sir, Kira said. I will make the shot. Nathanson studied her for a moment longer, then stepped back. Move out, Ghost 2. Bring our people home. Kira slung the rifle across her back, secured her gear, and walked out of the armory into the California night. The base had transformed into a staging area, personnel moving with urgent purpose. A Humvee waited with engine running, its driver a grim-faced corporal who nodded as Kira climbed into the passenger seat. As they pulled away from the armory, Kira saw the entire platoon lined up along the road. Cross stood at attention, his hand raised in salute. Martinez beside him, doing the same. Lucia, tears streaming down her face, saluting with rigid precision. Even Staff Sergeant Holloway stood among them, his expression unreadable but his hand raised in respect. The Humvee accelerated toward the base perimeter, leaving the lights and activity behind. The driver glanced at Kira. They're saying you are some kind of super soldier trained by a ghost in the mountains. That true? Something like that, Kira said, checking her rifle one more time. Well, I hope so, because those guys in the mountains, they got families. Kids. People waiting for them to come home. The driver's jaw was tight. Make the shot, Ashford. I will. The vehicle left the paved roads behind, bouncing along rough terrain that climbed steadily toward the dark mass of mountains looming against the star-scattered sky. Kira watched the landscape pass, her mind already calculating approach routes, firing positions, wind patterns. The ghost had drilled her on visualization, the practice of mentally rehearsing the shot until it became more memory than prediction. She could hear his voice now, as clear as if he sat beside her. When you take the shot, Do not think about the people watching. Do not think about the pressure. Do not think about success or failure. Think only about the wind, the distance, the trigger, and the target. Everything else is noise. The Humvee stopped at the base of the eastern ridge. The corporal killed the engine and pointed toward the dark slope rising before them. For kilometers that way, the GPS coordinates are programmed into your handheld. He paused. Good luck, Ashford. Kira stepped out into the cold mountain air, feeling the wind immediately. Strong, gusting, variable. Challenging, but not impossible. She activated her night vision, adjusted her pack, and began the climb. Behind her, the Humvee's lights disappeared. Ahead, the mountain waited in darkness. And somewhere beyond, 5 operators were counting on a shot they did not know was coming, from a shooter they had never heard of, trained by a legend they thought had disappeared forever. Kira Ashford moved into the night, every step purposeful, every breath controlled. The test was ending. The real work had begun, and in less than an hour, everyone would know exactly what 6 months in the wilderness with the ghost had created. The mountain was silent except for the wind. Kira climbed steadily toward her destiny, toward the shot that would define everything she had become, carrying the weight of 5 lives and the legacy of the man who had taught her that impossible was just another word for untried. The mountain terrain was exactly as brutal as Kira had anticipated. Loose shale threatened to send her sliding backward with every step. The temperature dropped with each meter of elevation gained, and the wind that had seemed challenging at base level now howled with predatory intensity. But she had climbed worse. The ghost had made sure of that. Her night vision turned the world into shades of green and black, revealing the treacherous path ahead. She moved with practiced efficiency, her breathing controlled despite the exertion and thinning air. The GPS on her wrist showed 3.2 kilometers remaining. Time elapsed, 18 minutes. Time remaining before weather window closed, 22 minutes. The mathematics were brutal but achievable. Her radio crackled. Ghost 2, this is Overwatch. Confirm status. Kira keyed the mic. Ghost 2 proceeding to position. ETA, 15 minutes. Copy that. Be advised, Alpha Team reports increasing hostile pressure. They need that marker as soon as you are in position. Understood. She pushed harder, her legs burning, her lungs working like bellows. The mountain demanded everything and offered nothing. Exactly like training. The ghost had once made her climb a peak while carrying 50 pounds of rocks, then immediately set up and engaged targets at extreme range. When she had protested that no real scenario would ever be that difficult, he had simply smiled. No, he had said, real scenarios will be worse. I am just preparing you to survive them. The ridge line appeared ahead, a jagged silhouette against the starlit sky. Kira covered the final 200 meters at a near sprint, her body screaming, but her mind coldly focused. She crested the ridge and immediately began scanning for the optimal firing position. There, a cluster of boulders providing natural cover and a clear line of sight toward the extraction coordinates. She dropped her pack, extended the rifle's bipod, and settled into position behind the scope. Her watch showed 19 minutes remaining. Ghost 2 in position, she transmitted. Beginning target acquisition. Through the scope, the valley below spread out in layers of darkness and shadow. She located the extraction point using the GPS coordinates, a flat area approximately 1,200 meters distant. Wind indicators, vegetation movement, and the feel of air currents against her face told her everything she needed to know. Winds gusting 35 to 40 knots from the northwest. Variable. Temperature 31 degrees. Elevation differential 800 meters. She ran the calculations in her head with the speed of long practice, factoring in air density, bullet trajectory, and the specific ballistics of the tracer round she would fire. Her radio came alive with a new voice, rough and urgent. Ghost 2, this is Raider 6. Alpha Team Leader. We're preparing to break contact and move to extraction. We need that marker in the next 10 minutes, or we will be too exposed. Raider 6, Ghost 2. I have eyes on extraction point. Stand by for marker. Roger. Raider 6 paused. I do not know who you are, Ghost 2, but we are counting on you. Do not miss." "I will not miss," Kira said, her voice carrying absolute certainty. She settled deeper into position, feeling the rifle become an extension of her body. The ghost had taught her that shooting at this level was not mechanical, but organic, a fusion of human and weapon into a single system designed for precision. She controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate, entering the state of focused calm that made impossible shots possible. The wind gusted hard, then dropped. Gusted again. She waited, feeling the pattern, understanding the rhythm. In the mountains, the ghost had made her wait for hours sometimes, learning to read wind not as chaos but as predictable variation. There were moments, brief windows, when the chaos aligned into order. She waited for that moment. Through her scope, she could see movement near the valley floor. Alpha Team, 5 shadows moving with tactical precision, suppressed weapons flashing as they engaged unseen enemies. They were breaking contact, falling back toward the extraction point, but in zero visibility, they were navigating blind. "Ghost 2, we are moving now. We need that marker." Kira's finger rested lightly on the trigger. The wind gusted 38 knots, then dropped to 32, then 28. She felt the pattern. One more gust, then a lull. The wind surged to 40 knots. She waited. It began to drop. 35, 30, 28, 25. Now, she exhaled slowly, her heart between beats, her mind clear of everything except the shot. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with familiar recoil. The tracer round arced through the darkness like a falling star, its bright trajectory visible even without the scope. 1,200 meters. Through mountain wind. From an elevated position after a brutal approach. The round impacted exactly where she had aimed, marking the extraction point with brilliant phosphorescent light. Perfect placement. Zero deviation. Marker on target. She transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Raider 6's voice exploded over the radio with raw relief. "Confirmed. We have visual on marker. Ghost 2, that was one hell of a shot. Moving to extraction now." Through her scope, Kira watched Alpha Team orient on the marker and sprint toward it with renewed purpose. They moved as a unit, covering each other, fighting through whatever resistance they faced. Within 3 minutes, they reached the extraction point. Raider 6 to Overwatch. Alpha Team at extraction. Request immediate pickup. Roger that, Alpha. Birds are inbound. ETA 4 minutes. Kira maintained Overwatch, her rifle tracking across the valley, ready to engage if any threats materialized. But the hostile forces, whoever they were, had apparently lost Alpha Team in the darkness and confusion. The helicopters arrived exactly on schedule, their rotors beating the air into submission. Alpha Team loaded with practice speed, and within seconds the birds lifted off, banking hard away from the mountain and accelerating toward safety. "Ghost 2, this is Overwatch. Confirm Alpha Team extracted safely." "Confirmed," Kira replied. "Mission complete. Outstanding work, Ghost 2. Return to base." Kira lowered the rifle, her hands trembling slightly now that the focus was broken. She had made the shot. 1,200 meters through impossible conditions. 5 lives saved. The ghost training validated in the most demanding circumstances possible. She sat back against the boulder, letting the moment wash over her. Below, the valley had returned to darkness and silence. Above, the stars shone with crystalline clarity, untouched by the drama that had unfolded beneath them. Her radio crackled one more time. "Ghost 2, this is Raider 6. I do not know your name, but I know what you did. Why get back to base? I am buying you the biggest steak they sell. You just saved 5 lives with 1 shot. That is the kind of shooting legends are made of." "Just doing what I was trained to do, Raider 6, Kira said quietly. "Safe flight home." She began breaking down her position, packing equipment with the same methodical precision she brought to everything. The mountain wind still howled, but it no longer mattered. The shot was made. The mission was complete. And waiting at the base below, an entire community of people who had underestimated her were about to confront the truth of who Kira Ashford really was. The descent would be faster than the climb. Gravity and success made everything easier. As she started down the mountain, Kira allowed herself a small smile. The ghost would be proud. She had waited for the moment, maintained discipline under impossible pressure, and when everything depended on a single shot, she had delivered. Just like he had taught her. The base lights glowed in the distance below, a constellation of human activity in the vast darkness. Kira moved toward them, no longer the recruit who could not climb a rope or hit a target. She was Ghost 2 now. She was the student of a legend. She was the shooter who made impossible shots. And everyone was about to learn that lesson in the most undeniable way possible. The Humvee that retrieved Kira from the mountain base arrived back at Camp Pendleton to a scene she had not anticipated. The entire platoon stood in formation outside the operations center, despite the late hour, despite having no official orders to be there. Behind them, what seemed like half the base had gathered, word having spread with the speed of wildfire about the impossible shot. As Kira stepped out of the vehicle, exhausted and covered in mountain dust, the formation snapped to attention. Commander Nathanson stood at the front, his posture rigid and formal. Staff Sergeant Holloway beside him, his face unreadable in the harsh security lights. The silence was absolute. Nathanson stepped forward. Recruit Ashford, report. Kira moved to stand before him, her body aching but her bearing professional. Sir, mission accomplished. Alpha team extracted safely. No friendly casualties. Nathanson nodded slowly, then did something Kira had never seen a commander do. He saluted her. A sharp, crisp salute that held for 3 full seconds before he dropped his hand. Behind him, every officer present followed suit. On behalf of Alpha Team and everyone on this base, thank you. That was extraordinary shooting under impossible conditions. Nathanson's voice carried across the assembled crowd. 1,200 meters through mountain winds that exceeded every safety parameter we have. One shot. Perfect placement. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. Vincent Carrick trained you well. He trained me to be ready for moments that matter, Sir, Kira said. Holloway stepped forward, his jaw working as if the words he needed to say were physically difficult to produce. Recruit Ashford, I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing the truth. I allowed harassment under my watch. I failed as an instructor and as a leader. His voice was strained but genuine. You displayed discipline, patience, and skill that I did not recognize. That failure is mine, not yours. The platoon behind him shifted uncomfortably. Cross and Martinez stood in the front rank, their faces reflecting shame and something approaching awe. Nathanson gestured toward the operations center. Alpha Team landed 10 minutes ago. Their leader, Chief Warrant Officer Garrett, requested to meet the shooter who saved his team. They are waiting inside. Kira followed Nathanson into the ops center, now cleared of the earlier chaos and occupied by 5 men in tactical gear, their faces weathered and exhausted but alive. The tallest, a man with silver streaking his temples and eyes that had seen too much, stepped forward. You're a Ghost too? His voice carried the gravel of combat and survival. Yes, sir. Recruit Kira Ashford. Garrett studied her for a long moment, taking in her youth, her slight frame, the mountain dust still coating her uniform. Then he extended his hand. Chief Warrant Officer Thomas Garrett, call sign Raider 6. You pulled off a shot I have only seen one other person make in my 20 years of service. He paused. That person was Gunnery Sergeant Vincent Carrick. Fallujah, 2004. 900 meters through a sandstorm. He trained me, sir, Kira said, shaking his hand. Everything I know about shooting, he taught me. Garrett's expression shifted to something approaching reverence. Carrick is alive? Where is he? Retired. Living in the Montana wilderness. He wanted privacy, so I would ask that you respect that. Of course. Garrett glanced at his team, all of them watching this exchange with intense interest. That man saved my life twice, and tonight his students saved it again. He reached into his vest and pulled out a patch, worn and faded. This was Carrick's unit patch from his sniper team. He gave it to me in Fallujah after a particularly bad firefight, told me to keep it as a reminder that angels come in unexpected forms. He held it out to Kira. I think he would want you to have it now. Kira accepted the patch, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you, sir. The other team members stepped forward one by one, introducing themselves, shaking her hand, expressing gratitude that transcended words. These were Tier 1 operators, the best of the best, and they looked at her with respect earned through action rather than rank or reputation. When they finally departed, Nathanson remained. He pulled up a chair and gestured for Kira to sit. We need to discuss your future. Your demonstrated skills put you far beyond standard recruit training. I am recommending you for immediate entry into the Advanced Marksmanship program, with potential assignment to specialized units. Kira nodded slowly. That was always the goal, sir. But Sergeant Carrick wanted to ensure I could handle more than just shooting. He wanted to know I could handle pressure, adversity, and maintain mission focus regardless of circumstances. And you proved that tonight. Nathanson leaned back. But I have to ask, was it worth it? The harassment, the mockery, the isolation. Was the test worth what you endured? Kira considered this carefully. I learned who people really are when they think someone is weak. I learned which people have character and which people only have confidence. I learned that the hardest part of being exceptional is not the skill itself, but knowing when to reveal it. She met his eyes. Yes, sir. It was worth it. Nathanson smiled, a rare expression that softened his weathered features. Carrick taught you well, not just how to shoot, but how to think like an operator. He stood. Get some rest, Ashford. Tomorrow we start your formal evaluation for advanced programs. But tonight, you should know that what you did will be talked about for years. You just became a legend on this base. I just want to serve, sir. To use what I was taught to protect people who need it. That is exactly why you will go far. Dismissed. Kira walked out into the night air to find the platoon still assembled, though now in informal clusters rather than formation. As she appeared, they parted, creating a path. Lucia was the first to approach, tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry for not standing up sooner, for letting them treat you that way. You stood up when it counted, Kira said gently. That matters. Cross stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away. I do not know how to apologize for what I said, what I did. You are everything I pretended to be, and I could not see it. You were never pretending to be a sniper, Cross. You are a good soldier. You just need to learn that strength comes in forms you do not always recognize. Martinez nodded in agreement. We all need to learn that. What you did tonight, that was not just shooting. That was courage. Real courage. The platoon began to disperse, but not before each member found a way to acknowledge what had happened. Some with words, some with gestures, all with a new understanding of the woman they had misjudged so completely. Kowalski waited near the barracks entrance, his expression knowing. Carrick will be proud, not just of the shot, but of how you handled everything leading up to it. I could not have done it without you, Chief. You protected my secret when you could have exposed it. I protected it because I understood it. Kowalski smiled. You know what the best part tonight was? Watching everyone realize that the person they thought was weakest was actually the strongest. That is a lesson this platoon needed to learn. As Kira finally entered the barracks, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave, she found her bunk had been made with crisp precision, her gear organized, a note resting on her pillow. It was from the entire platoon, signatures covering the page, expressing gratitude, respect, and apology. She lay down, still in her dusty uniform, too tired to change. Through the window, she could see the stars, the same stars that had watched over her shot just hours ago. Somewhere in the Montana mountains, the ghost was probably sitting on his porch, drinking coffee, unaware that his student had just validated everything he taught her. But somehow, Kira thought he knew anyway. He always knew. Tomorrow would bring evaluations, assignments, and a new chapter in her service. But tonight, she was simply Kira Ashford, the recruit who made an impossible shot, who endured impossible pressure, who proved that patience and discipline could overcome any obstacle. The barracks settled into nighttime quiet. For the first time since arriving at Camp Pendleton, Kira slept deeply and without worry, knowing that she had passed every test, completed every mission, and honored the legacy of the man who believed she could become extraordinary. 3 days after the mountain rescue, Kira stood on the rifle range at dawn, the same range where she had deliberately missed targets and endured mockery. But everything had changed. The morning light painted the targets in shades of gold, and instead of standing alone in failure, she was surrounded by respect. Commander Nathanson had fast-tracked her evaluation, and representatives from multiple specialized units had arrived to assess her capabilities. She had spent the past 72 hours demonstrating skills that went far beyond a single impressive shot. Long-range precision, moving targets, elevated positions, adverse weather. Every test, she passed with the quiet confidence the ghost had instilled in her. Now, on this final morning of evaluation, she prepared for one last demonstration. The observers included not just base personnel, but senior officers from Divisional Command who had flown in specifically to witness what they had been told was generational talent. Staff Sergeant Holloway approached, carrying a rifle case. His demeanor toward her had transformed completely, respect replacing contempt. "Ashford, they want to see you engage targets at varying distances, up to 1,500 meters." He opened the case, revealing a pristine M107 Barrett 50 caliber rifle. "Think you can handle this?" Kira lifted the heavy weapon with practiced ease. "Yes, Staff Sergeant. I trained on similar systems in the mountains." Holloway shook his head with something approaching wonder. "I still cannot believe we had someone with your capabilities, and I was too blind to see it." He paused. "For what it is worth, you have changed how I evaluate every recruit who comes through here. I will never make that mistake again." "That is all I could ask for, Staff Sergeant." The demonstration began. Target at 500 meters. Hit. Target at 800 meters. Hit. Target at 1,000 meters, obscured by morning haze. Hit. With each successful engagement, the observers made notes, exchanged glances, nodded with approval. Finally, the test everyone had been waiting for. A target at 1,500 meters, the maximum distance the range allowed, visible only as a shimmer in the rising heat. Kira settled into position, feeling the familiar calm descend. Wind from the southwest at 12 knots. Temperature rising, creating mirage effects. Elevation compensation. She made micro-adjustments to her scope, her breathing slowing, her heart rate dropping. The ghost's voice echoed in her memory. "Trust your training. Trust yourself. The shot will come when everything aligns." She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett's report echoed across the range like thunder. 1,500 meters downrange, the target showed a perfect center mass hit. The observers erupted in discussion. One of them, a colonel with decades of service ribbons, approached Nathanson. "Commander, I have seen a lot of shooters in my career. What I just witnessed puts her in the top 1% of military marksmen worldwide. Where the hell did she come from?" Nathanson smiled. "Montana, sir. Trained by someone you might remember. Gunnery Sergeant Vincent Carrick." The colonel's expression shifted to shock, then understanding. "The ghost trained her? That explains everything." He looked at Kira with renewed interest. "I thought Carrick disappeared after the war." "He did, sir," Kira said. "He wanted peace and privacy. But he also wanted to pass on what he knew to someone who would use it properly." The colonel nodded slowly. "Well, he chose his student well. I am approving your transfer to the Scout Sniper program, effective immediately. You will skip standard prerequisites and move directly into advanced training." Over the next hour, multiple offers came in. Scout Sniper, Special Operations, Marksmanship Instructor positions. Every specialized unit that required precision shooting wanted her. It was overwhelming, the sudden transformation from rejected recruit to sought-after operator. Lucia found her during a break, bringing water and wearing a smile that held both pride and sadness. "So I guess this means you are leaving our platoon." "Looks that way," Kira said. "Advanced training starts next month." "I'm happy for you. Really. But I'm also going to miss having you around to remind me what real strength looks like." Lucia hesitated. "I have been thinking a lot about what you said, about courage and silence. I put in a request to transfer to a leadership program." I want to be the kind of officer who creates environments where people like you do not have to hide who they are. That is the best outcome I could hope for, Kira said warmly. You have the compassion and the courage. You just needed to find them. Cross and Martinez approached together, their body language hesitant. Cross spoke first. We heard you were shipping out soon. Just wanted to say, again, that we are sorry, and that watching you these past few days has been humbling. Martinez nodded. You could have rubbed it in our faces, could have made us look like fools. But you have been nothing but professional. That says more about your character than any shot you could make. We all have room to grow, Kira said. You both are good soldiers. Just remember that strength comes in many forms, and the strongest people are often the ones facing the most pressure with the least recognition. They shook hands, a gesture that felt like closure on a difficult chapter. That evening, as the sun set over the Pacific, Kira sat alone on a bench overlooking the ocean. The day's evaluations were complete. Her future was decided. Tomorrow she would begin out-processing from basic training and preparing for her new assignment. She pulled out the envelope that had arrived that morning, forwarded from a post office box in Montana. The handwriting was angular and precise, instantly recognizable. She opened it carefully and read the single page inside. Kira, the letter began. I heard through old channels about what happened in the mountains. A 1,200-meter shot under those conditions. 5 lives saved. I knew you were ready, but seeing you apply what I taught you in a real-world scenario makes this old ghost proud beyond words. You did not just make the shot. You maintained discipline, endured hardship, and proved that patience is its own form of strength. That was always the real test. The shooting was just the final exam. You have honored everything I tried to teach you, and you have become the operator I hoped you would be. Wherever your service takes you, remember that the hardest shots are often the ones you choose not to take. Stay sharp, stay humble, and stay true to who you are. The world needs people like you. Carrick. Kira folded the letter carefully and looked out at the ocean, waves rolling in with eternal patience. The ghost had given her more than shooting skills. He had given her a framework for life, a way of moving through the world with purpose and discipline. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Commander Nathanson joined her on the bench, following her gaze toward the horizon. Beautiful sunset. Yes, sir. I receive your duty preferences. Scout sniper program, specialized reconnaissance, forward observer roles. You want to be where the action is. I want to be where I can use what I was taught to protect people. Sir, that is why Sergeant Carrick trained me. Nathanson was quiet for a moment. In all my years of service, I have seen maybe 3 shooters who could do what you do. Carrick was one. You are another. But what makes you special is not just the skill. It is the character behind it. You could have broken under the pressure we put you through, could have revealed yourself out of ego or anger. But you stayed focused on the mission. That is what separates good soldiers from legendary ones. I just did what needed to be done, sir. Exactly. And you will keep doing that, which is why you're going to have an extraordinary career. Nathanson stood. Get some rest, Ashford. You have earned it. As he walked away, Kira allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The journey from underestimated recruit to respected operator had been brutal, but it had also been necessary. She had learned who she was under pressure, had proven that patience could overcome any obstacle, and had honored the legacy of a man who believed she could become something exceptional. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite moment, or share if you have ever been underestimated and prove the doubters wrong. We all have hidden strengths waiting for the right moment to shine. The stars began appearing overhead, the same stars that had watched over a mountain shot, the same stars that would guide her through whatever missions lay ahead. Kira Ashford sat in the gathering darkness, no longer hiding, no longer pretending, finally free to be exactly who she had trained so hard to become. Somewhere in the Montana mountains, the ghost probably stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching similar stars and knowing that his student had passed every test. The impossible shot had been made. The hidden seal had been revealed, and a legend had been born from patience, discipline, and one perfect moment when everything aligned. The ocean waves continued their eternal rhythm. The base settled into nighttime routine, And Kira closed her eyes, ready for whatever came next, carrying the ghost's lessons and her own hard-won strength into a future bright with possibility.